Hi everyone. Um, I don't know if this counts as a takeover, but I am waiting for Anupama ma'am, and then we will begin this conversation. So, hi to all of you who are joining in. Ma'am will be with us in a minute. Hi Deepak. I never know where to look with someone. Hello ma'am.
Hello Vinay.
So lovely to see you. And we are both twinning.
Oh yes, yes, of
So
course.
we are truly on the same page.
Uh, Completely on the same page, literally and figuratively.
Yeah, absolutely. Which also takes away some of my my tension because, like I was mentioning, even on my story, I said, I mean, for me, just like having a conversation with you, I'll just be looking like this the whole time. I won't even know what to say. So,
No, I should be looking like this. As I said yesterday, that talking to Vinay Varanasi about epics is like talking to Vidura about politics, So I am in complete awe. So,
the feeling is very, very much mutual. And I think just the fact that we're coming, looking at, the same lens of relationships from like or two different lenses to look at relationships. One is the epics perspective. Second is
yeah.
the perspective you bring, which I'm not going to give away too much of what I'm trying to ask you or what I have in mind.
Yeah.
But I think that people are still coming in. So maybe we'll
Joining.
or so.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
But I just want to say that I think particularly about relationships, one of the things that I've really been so fascinated is the way you have really decoded and demystified so much of Annamacharya's understanding of even relationships that Bhakta shared with Venkateshwara in particular. So one day I would just love to hear like all about those relationships look like.
Absolutely. Annamacharya's relationships are very natural also. Even the Nayikas with Swami, or the Nayikas between themselves also. It's a very organic kind of relationships they have. So it's not yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I find that very interesting because so with Tyagaraja Swami or Mutswami Dikshitar, I can see a lot of influences with Tyagaraja Swami. Of course, the Valmiki Ramayana forms a good body of influence on his work. But with Annamacharya, sometimes I wonder, do the epics cast their their shadow on his compositions? Does it come out like that?
Yeah, they do. You have songs where the epics are kind of influencing it, but Annamacharya's trajectory, I feel, is very different. He's on the thing of the Alvars. The way they handle love, the way they handle the whole Vishishtadvaita idea. I think it's the Alvars, and it is also a lot of influence of Yakshaganam, which was at that period. So there are a lot of and Dvipada, Manjari Dvipada, and things like that. They have influenced Potana's the Sisapadyam meter. All this has really influenced Annamacharya's methodology.
So even the Divya Prabandhams, all of that would have something to do with
it. Divya Prabandham is majorly has influenced him. In fact, he's considered to be a latter-day Alvar, Annamacharya.
Right.
He's considered to be, Nammalvar's incarnation. So, definitely.
Did he talk about relationships in the epics, like say Krishna's relationships with either the gopis or his siblings? Was that something that he explored or not?
Not much, but yes, his Krishna songs are, he has, of course, the Yashoda Krishna thing. And he has this very human, humanizing Krishna to the, like saying songs like Itti Mudduladi Balude Lavade, songs like that where he says, he's put his hand in hot milk and he's pretending that, some ant has bitten him. So things like that, where he talks about the childishness. And then he has Krishna also as the, the target of the woman who's like saying, Appati enda chamatal itte undena. So, it's like those kind of songs. So, his Krishna takes on many connotations. And of course, we have, we had once discussed about the Shravana Bahulashtami Nadu. the birth of Krishna, the avatara, the actual avatara idea is also brought out very much by him, in fact.
So the exploration also comes from multiple folklore angles and from
lots of. I think it comes from his own understanding of human psychology on one side. Then the whole thing of the Vaishnava, the sampradaya of the 5 elements like the vyuha, the vibhava, the para, vyuha, vibhava, antaryami, that archa, that whole idea, it has also influenced him a lot, along with the Alvars and Bhagavatam also. Potana's Andhra Mahabhagavatam especially.
Absolutely. And Bhagavatam takes me also towards Bharatam. So something that I would to understand from your perspective is in your own deep body of work, have you explored relationships in the Bharatam, some lesser known relationships or conversations that come even in folk versions of the Bharatam?
Yes. I did one. Actually, I had conceived one piece called Subhadra Vilapam.
Okay.
So this piece talks about Subhadra crying over Abhimanyu's body. So she's crying over that. And then she questions every relationship here. So she says, Dik balam bhima senasya. What is the use of the balam of Bhima? Dik parthasya dhanushmatam. What is the use of his archery? What is the use of the Vrishni Veeras? What is the use of all this? And he says, the same thing is reflected in Potana's epic also, in the Andhra Mahabharatam also, where she says, Pandavul indarundi okkani kadangalera. She asks them directly. So that is very interesting, because then Krishna appears and he tells her, because whenever we talk about Krishna's compassion or, in relationships in the epics, it's primarily Draupadi whom we are looking at.
Right.
It's always the
Kunti, because
Kunti or, exactly. But Subhadra is always like this, late underdog, never, really explode in the epic at all. Absolutely. But here she's very strong, in such a section where, so she asks him, she says, you say that Partha or Arjuna is half your body. So are you going to avenge my son's death or not? So she takes the promise from Krishna that he will avenge Abhimanyu's. Yes, he says, Arjuna is half my body. So anyone who's Arjuna's enemy is my enemy. So you can rest assured, he says. So that I thought was very interesting.
Absolutely. This aspect also, like through a relationship, right? Like through a apparently sibling relationship between Krishna and Subhadra, they also bring like Narayanatvam, all of that, like divinity is packed into this conversation.
Exactly. Dharma is there, the duty idea is there, the dharma, the auchitya idea is there of, kshatriya dharma and things like that.
Absolutely.
So all these elements are, interwoven into the relationship. That's what's interesting.
Acknowledging the fact that a relationship is not just, two beings constantly being in harmony where there is never any conflict, there is never any apparent disinterest or difference of opinion. It takes away from that, because on one hand it humanizes it, but at the same time it also acknowledges the need for that churn, right? That's what I find very fascinating about relationships like this.
In epics, as you rightly said, every element of the relationship is important, right? Like the ups, the downs. That is what is relationship basically. To be able to explore, the good, the bad, the up, the downside, and the highs, everything, right?
Acknowledge that it collectively makes it's larger than the sum of its parts, right? Just the idea that in this relationship, while these may be like, these are like Paravasudeva has incarnated, right? But at the same time, he engage with those emotions. And when he does engage with those emotions, what are the other things? So that's what I feel like, even in relationships, Krishna is such a great facilitator. Because in his presence, he knows how to get different emotions out of different people, and he responds accordingly. He doesn't ever do this holier than thou, because honestly, he is the only person entitled to that holier than thou. But it comes out, his response, like you said, most of the time, because we are fixated on his equation with Draupadi in particular, with that Sakha Bhavam, we don't hear of too many aspects like this.
Correct. So in fact, it's interesting, even in the Bhagavatam, like there is a section in that also where I think Narada talks and says that you people don't know who is living amongst y'all as your friend and as your brother, as your cousin, as your, somebody's elder brother, somebody's younger brother. You people don't realize who's living amongst y'all. So that relationship he brings out. He says, you think he's just your brother or your, cousin, but you don't really know who he is.
and even when Vidura goes, Krishna sends Vidura back to Vrindavanam. And he says, inquire about the gopis. That's all that is said. Even that relationship between Vidura and Krishna is so beautiful that when Vidura goes there, he kind of holds that very close, that he should explain all of Krishna Tattvam to the gopis. But the gopis are so immersed in love that they don't need an intellectualization of that entire process. They don't need to understand him as Paramatma because their love is anyway overflowing for him. And I think it goes even beyond humanizing, right? It's deifying from a very...
Completely. Absolutely. I don't think it is really humanizing. I think it is to say that every emotion is explored, in multiple levels, even when you recognize him as a deity, because he has taken a human avatara, that's all. Right. So, but at a time when the avatara necessity or the paramartha of that avatara is over, it also drops. The whole idea also drops, and he drops the whole connection, because like Yoga Sutras also define Ishvara. They define Ishvara and they say he's one who is untouched by anything, actually, even though he pretends to be touched.
Exactly. So
that's what brings me to that second canto of Gita Govindam, which it's called Aklesha Keshava. That chapter is called Aklesha Keshava, when all klesha is being exhibited by Radha in that. So you wonder why he's called it Aklesha. So at that point, you realize that he's saying that Radha at this particular point is filled with klesha, but Krishna is Aklesha only. He doesn't have those kleshas. It's all it's all a leela, it's all a game that's going on. So it's interesting.
Probably would have inspired a lot of later bhaktas, right? In terms of their equations or their relationships with the divine, right? Because on one hand there is interpersonal relationships, and they made Krishna or Paramatma in that case, even Rama for that matter, they were able to feel that connection and to have that relationship. But I also feel that, like in a lot of modern literature, just that aspect that it's very, that my relationship with Paramatma can only be very narrow. That's a very, very, very modern and a post.
It's a very limited purview, actually. It's a very limited purview to think that, if I'm a bhakta or if this is bhakti, then, there's only got to be that kind of a bhava.
Right.
I don't think. I think if you're a bhakta, you have a right to say anything you want to your deity. That's the beauty of our...
things that have been said like that. I'm very curious from the perspective of composers, from the perspective of Naika Bhavam. What are some of those things that have been said to Paramatma in the context of relationships?
Yeah, actually, even in the Narasimha thing in Bhagavatam also.
Mm-hmm.
So he says now that after the Sharanagati is committed, like after Prahlada has committed the Sharanagati, then the onus is on Narasimha. The onus is on him to fulfill whatever this guy wants. Absolutely. So, if he says you have to come out of a spoon, you have to come out of a spoon, basically.
Absolutely.
So he talks about that section where, the entire universe was pervaded by Narasimha Bhava.
Exactly. Everything, the art of Vishnu was present in everything
He says, he was just waiting to see where this guy will point out and where he needs to jump out from.
In fact, in Purana Bhagavatam, Purana mentions a line there saying, at that point, every being converts. Narasimha is ready to jump out of anything, but it is the pillar who said, please come from me. So Narasimha, that entire context moves to that. Which is, every time I think of it, it gets goosebumps, because that is his commitment to the relationship of what Prahlada said, right? Because Hiranyakashipu says, is he there? And he says, he is there. So that confidence really emerges. So that relationship is so, that is the confidence saying,
that is nothing but precociousness on the part of the, bhakta to say that, I'll call him, he'll come from anywhere. So that is the thing. It's not all about bhakti, Swami, you come. It's not that. It's like, you damn well come because I've done Sharanagati to you. So it's also that idea. And that's very interesting, I thought, yeah, the Bhakta has so many levels. Like, Ramadasa says, na, he says, in fact, he abuses him. Evadobba Abba Sommani Kulukuchu Tirigevu Ramachandra. So
and
you can't get worse than that.
He said, does your father send it? Dasharatha sent it from Ayodhya. Your father-in-law Janaka sent it from Mithila. Neither of them sent. I got it made. That I can look from a very from a typical or a layman perspective, or an untrained eye, it can look crass. It can look like, what is this? But bhakti has room for all of this, right? Relationships
completely
are very much. They allow that engagement because he's Aklesha Keshava, because he's not going to be touched by this. There is no harm in touching him like this. He'll accept that touch as well.
Oh yes, absolutely. Like Sarangapani says, "Enta pedavade Venugopaludu."
Wow.
So you don't understand why he's saying that. It's a proper Nindastuti. Where, he says, this guy is so poor, he doesn't have a bed, he sleeps on snakes, he sleeps in the middle, doesn't have a house, he sleeps in the middle of the ocean. So he just goes on and on. And It's very interesting. And what I found interesting there is the reference to, he says this, why can't he sit inside a temple like every other god? Why does he have to keep appearing wherever his bhaktas are? So that's a question he asks.
Wow.
So it also, it also brings me to the connection between, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Krishna, that whole idea also, because there is one small story I remember where, it says that when they do the bhajana sankirtan and they are walking, they are not aware of time or anything. So, it gets dark and then they can't see. So Krishna doesn't want the bhajana to stop. So he lights a lamp and he's walking along with them, so that they don't stop singing. So I thought that was very interesting.
These relationships, right? Like on one hand, and also shades of relationships even in epics where one part of one character will immediately recognize Paramatma. When Krishna is recognized or when Rama is recognized, the whole equation changes because there is also that overwhelming love. Plus, there is that feeling that there is Paramatma. But how they work around that, like Bharata and Rama make such an interesting pair in that sense. Because that whole engagement with them, of course, in modern reading, we've shrunk it down to one page where Bharata just comes and says, come and take back your kingdom. Says, no. But how elaborately Valmiki describes it, how much Bharata tries. First, he threatens him, then he literally does Sam Dandabhet with his own brother.
Everything he uses. And even the sections where he's discussing with Kaikeyi or he's talking about all of them, how elaborate those sections are. He says, how did you think that these two Nara Vyagras, Rama, Lakshmana, how did you think you will send them away and you expect me to sit on this throne? So that, and then even the Dasharatha thing, when he says, Kaikeyi was like that, the burning coal which is hidden under the ash, under the, thing. You don't know that it's still hot and it's burning.
Absolutely. And now she has burnt this entire kulam,
She has burnt this entire kulam, down to ashes, he says.
And the relationship, how that relationship of Rama and Bharata is influencing Bharata even when Rama is not there. Because Bharata wants to kill Shatrughna, in fact, drags this one to the forefront. He drags Manthara and he is about to kill her, and Bharata says Rama won't like it, so he won't kill. So and we don't see this, right? We don't, in the Valmiki Ramayana, we don't see them growing up. Unlike in the case of Krishna's Leelas, which are described in detail, how
some childhood,
that isn't, we don't see any aspects of that here. But despite that, to see that, like we see the evolved version of it here, whereas in Krishna we see the evolving version of it. So both those relationships are so touching at some level that it stops being about, I can't say it stops, but that even the Paramatma aspect fades because it's just so endearing that, like, this is the love that they, and that one theme, right? How taking that single theme of siblings, how how Ravana and Kumbhakarna work as siblings, how Ravana and Vibhishana work as siblings, how Krishna and Parashurama work as siblings, how Duryodhana or the Pandavas and the Kauravas, just one theme of siblings, one theme of relationships. The entire
myriad,
absolutely. And I can't help but think that this would have obviously influenced the way that bhaktas engaged, right? In terms of even role play of which character they like, right?
Completely. See, another thing that strikes me here is, when you see the Ramayana and when you see the Mahabharata as epics, both are about Dharma Samstapana, both are about Dharma basically. But,
Absolutely.
in Ramayana, everybody is on their absolute exemplary behavior where, relationships between one and the other is concerned. Everybody does exactly what they are meant to do at the right time in the right way.
Right.
Mahabharata is completely the opposite. Everybody is still thinking about dharma, but everybody does the wrong thing that they're supposed to do at the wrong time, and they kind of messing up everything half the time.
Absolutely. Yeah. And
So that's
the dance he maintains in both places very beautifully. Because in the Ramayana, he lets it go on. If, like you said, everyone is an exemplary behavior, right? Like everyone's getting 10 on 10 for their behavior here.
yeah, totally.
In the
Yeah.
Mahabharata, even Ravana for that matter, has like for the most part, he gets
See,
decent.
you are a villain. You are a perfect villain. You do everything that is required of you being a villain.
Absolutely. And that also in a graceful way. Ravana is
that also in a grace.
Like who sinks to new lows every day, who also has
Yes.
in terms of like the fact that the hoarding of like all the negative forces is so much more in the Mahabharata, right? In terms of whereas with Ravana, he's not gathering those levels of that army, but what Duryodhana gathers in terms of all of the forces.
Everything.
So the orchestration that Krishna does is very, very different over there.
Completely. In fact, the scholar Mr. Bharat Gupta, he had once mentioned one equation about the Ramayana Mahabharata, which I thought was very interesting. It kind of struck me really hard when he said that. He said, see, the idea of sacrifice or the idea of dharma in connection to a relationship is also something that, has to be well thought out. And whether it works or not is a question of, thinking. Like, he gave an example. He said, see, when Rama left everything for his father and went, it perfectly worked. Because he went, he killed the Rakshasas, he came, he established Ramarajyam, everything worked. But everything went haywire when Bhishma did the same thing.
Beautiful. Absolutely.
He said it was a complete wrong decision because of Bhishma not sitting on the throne, you had a succession of useless people sitting on the throne.
And Bhishma's commitment, so there the letter of the Dharma became very important, saying that I will be committed to the Kuru clan, whoever is sitting, but whoever is sitting there is not binding.
He's not competent to sit. So the whole trajectory would have been different had Bhishma been the, king. Right. So the sacrifice in Mahabharata doesn't pay off because it is completely asamanjasa. It is not suitable to the whole thing. Right. And whereas in Ramayana, it completely paid off the whole thing.
And so just aspect that it's not, dharma is not a rule book saying in all times this is what needs to be done. There are situational dharmas. There's so much of context in this.
And viveka, you have to use viveka there.
Absolutely.
That is
to what should work, what should not work.
Absolutely. What works, what won't work, what will be the future of this, what will be the the downside. I think all these have to be taken into consideration there. And I think that is what is relationship, That is what is relationship.
Absolutely. And even if you look at aspects in which relationships come out in all their completeness, it shows in Mahabharata, it shows those gray shades for what it is. I love that bit towards the end of the war where Gandhari is walking on the entire Kurukshetra and she can only feel her death. She can hear her daughters-in-law crying, mourning over their husbands. And that anger comes out for her. And she curses him, saying, this is Krishna saying that you will also die miserable death at the hands of a hunter. And he smiles at her and he says, I was anyway going to go like that. You didn't have to take that of effort and lose your purpose that you have earned by keeping your eyesight shut all these years. But anyway, it's gone now. The relationship is pure. It's very raw. It's not, she knows who Krishna is. There's no denying it. But
but that moment, that is the thing of the relationship. In that moment, you don't care who Krishna is. You are only, bemoaning your loss at that point. So nothing else matters at that point of time.
So overwhelming. And also that idea, even after that even in that relationship, there's something that I really love is Krishna is not holding it on saying, oh, Gandhari spoke to me like this that day. It's over for him. He you need not have done this. It would have anyway gone like this. But okay,
Yes.
it's just such a plain acceptance and such a moving on, such a situational moving on, saying, okay, now the story also proceeds. So
Yes.
that's something that I think also is something that would have also guided many a bhakta in their own relationships with Paramatma, in their own relationships with their people around them.
Absolutely. I think Annamacharya writes in one song, as you're talking, I just remembered, he tells him, he says, I don't understand you, Swami, because, even the guy who praises you also gets moksha. Even the guy who curses you also gets moksha. So there is no discrimination, he says. He says, you killed Shishupala, who died abusing you, but because he died in your hands with your Sudarshana Chakra, he also got moksha. And, a person who has praised you, so you don't have any discrimination. What do I do? Anyway, you will give moksha, he says. So that's very interesting.
Partha and Shishupala will receive it. Vibhishana and Ravana receive it.
So everybody will receive it. Good, bad, ugly. You will all receive it, if you died at his hands. So I thought that was...
To die at his hands also, you have to earn that, because Shishupala...
You have to earn... Yes.
So they... Constant, it is Chintana. Hiranyakashipu is also Chintana. It's just engaging to the point that it's fruit. It's kind of ripened, right? And the second it ripens, that's it. It will fall. Fruit.
That's it. Yes.
I love that idea, that relationship, take away from that toxic positive idea that like everything is always harmonious, or that there's a way of engaging with Paramatma. It's not at all the case.
Not at all.
Space so much. Bhaktas in particular. I mean, I keep going back to that because I keep feeling that the epics speak to bhaktas in probably a very different way, as opposed to just a great story. Because for a bhakta, there's always, because Tyagaraja Swami also does that, right? He, in one of the compositions, when he says Adamodi Galade, he talks about how he says, why won't you talk to me? And then he says, to the Amsha of Shankara, that is Hanuman, who knew all Chaduvulanni Telisi Shankaram Sudaina, despite the fact that he was Shankara's Amsha and that he knew all the Vedas and he knew all the Agamas, you still didn't talk to him, then what you'll talk to me? So that is your level of engagement. You're too up there to even engage with Hanuman, then what am I going to be there? So
correct.
That establishment of that something, it's just something deeply magical in the way that engagement happens.
Absolutely. Yes. It's really...
What is one relationship that you find very, very fascinating from the epics? This is something I'll probably talk about on Saturday.
I don't know. Actually, I find all the relationships very fascinating. But I don't know. See, if I looked at the epics. See, your forte is, of course, the epics proper. So I've looked at it more from the point of view of Vagyakara, literature and the influence of the epics on the Vagyakara literature. Primarily, that's been my focus more. So, I find the Sita Rama thing very interesting.
Absolutely.
The Rama-Sita relation. This is where I, felt, I think even you and I were discussing this before also, that in one relationship only you can have so many shades, right?
Absolutely.
So, they are lovers. Yes, Rama and Sita are eternal lovers, of course. But, the element of Vatsalya, which he feels for him, and then the element of he, can do anything, the deifying of Rama. So,
Absolutely.
I think, I don't know about, it must be for men also, but from the point of view of a woman, I always feel that, when there is that kind of love, it is always a mixture of three ideas. The lover, the son, and the deity. So, a woman always loves like that, is what what I feel. That, she wants to protect him, cherish him, like you would protect a son. Then, you love him as a lover, and then you also worship him as a deity.
Absolutely.
So, that is very interesting. And I find that in one song, of Annamacharya, where it's Sita is actually talking to Hanuman. And she says, Ekkadi Maya Mrugamu, Ela Temmanti Nenu. What is this Maya Mrugam? What is this golden deer? How can I be such a fool? Why did I ask him to bring it? And then she says, Ee aparadhamu na vallane jarigindani, you tell him. Tell him that this is my mistake. I did this. And then she asks him, she says, how will he come? And how will Rama fight with this demon? On one side, she has the doubt. She says he's so slim and he's so, elegant. How will he fight this demon? She says. And then she says, does he eat? Does he sleep properly? What is it? So that Vatsalya, comes there so beautifully. Right. And then she says, no, but he can do anything. So ask him to come fast and, take me away from here. So all three shades you find in the same song.
Wow,
of feeling motherly, feeling, doubtful, being the lover, being the, devotee, everything. So, that is
within. Because there's also the idea of, why isn't he coming yet? What is stopping him?
Yes, correct.
There is that expectation of a lover as well, saying that lover also means that, you have to show up back to me in this relationship as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's a different shade of Vatsalya. It is also Vatsalya, but it's a different shade of Vatsalya.
Yes.
Beautiful.
So I find that very interesting, when they have the same relationship has multiple shades and multiple connotations.
Right.
That's...
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. So now that you have said Sitarama, I mean, I keep giving this disclaimer for all the Alap sessions that in the epic project, especially that the Ramayana is always has my whole heart because I think there's just so much. It can look like a very black and white story, but there's just so much that is hidden in that Sitarama Dampatyam is. I mean, there's a reason it is what it is.
Yes, and what I like? I like the, even though there's been a lot of criticism of how different poets have taken different trajectories when it comes to the same epic being translated into the vernaculars.
Yes.
But I think it's very interesting that those trajectories that they took.
Exactly.
Because, even from the point of view of relationships, which we are discussing today, it shows the relationship of the times.
Yes.
It gives the socio-political, historical structure of the times. Absolutely. And you as a poet or you as a person who's influencing people through bhakti, how your relationship you are forming with the society around you.
Absolutely. So what is the language that you're going to use therefore? How do I employ that language? Factoring on these things, that reflects in my composition, that reflects in how I'm going to view that epic. Absolutely. Because I think there's a lot of intellectualization saying, but Valmiki didn't say this, but Tulsi said this, but Kamban said this. It doesn't, because all of them have something. That relationship is bringing out a new aspect. As you said, it could be socio, political, cultural, economic.
Yes.
But it is a reflection of something, and there is a reason it is there. So finding out how does that influence a relationship in a certain way is a very, very fascinating.
Exactly. See, for example, that whole Pushpavatika prasang, or that whole, that flower garden, the first meeting of Rama and Sita.
Yeah.
It is not, it's there in Kamban, it's there in Ramcharitramanas, it's there in Tulsidas. I mean, it's not there in the Valmiki Ramayanam. So, but the beauty of that, you can see that period. That 16th century, the whole Alankara Shastra texts have already been formed. Everything is done. So the beauty of that, when he says, there is one line which particularly strikes me, and he says when in Pushpavatika Prasang, where, he says, the way Rama kept looking at Sita, through the flower creepers, Sakuchi, Manahu Sakuchi Nimi Taje Diganchal, he says. So he says it feels that, he looked at her so unblinkingly that Nimi, the god of blinking, was so ashamed that he left Rama's eyes and he went away. How beautiful is that?
Absolutely. I bet everybody watching that thought about how not to blink for a second, because I did. But that is the impact of that, right? So the intellectualization of it doesn't matter saying, did it happen, did it not? That's not the question at all. The question is, what is the beauty in that relationship that is being conveyed? That is the poetic license, call it whatever. That is the poetic inspiration that it opens up. It's just, oh wow, I could go on and on discussing relationships.
Yeah, you can go on. See, for example, the trajectory that Jayadeva took away from the Bhagavata Puran. Right, because Bhagavata Puran is always about the gopis, the Pushpa, the Geetams, everything about the gopis expressing their, their uncontrollable love for Krishna. Absolutely. But Krishna is always the Bhagavan.
Yes.
He's always the Bhagavan there, and he's always like telling them, this is right, this is wrong, this is this. But exactly at that point, I feel Jayadeva just took the detour.
Right,
and if you see, there is one shloka in which he says that Krishna's chest was red with the kumkuma of Radha, of hers. It is as if the love hidden inside his heart has become apparent outside.
Wow.
So I think that love which was inside was in the Bhagavata Puran. So he kind of, exposed the whole idea through this.
Absolutely. So what looks like it's contradictory is really a churning, right? It's a churning of those relationships.
Yeah, it is a continuation of that relationship possibility.
Yeah, it is the
exactly. Which could not be explored there, I thought. Absolutely. Because as as I saw your wonderful Radha thing also, where you talk about, how Radha is not really revealed, her name is not revealed, but, they talk about the sister Sakhi of Krishna. And so he, the way he progressed, even though he took a detour, that's very interesting. So for me, always it's fascinating to see the, Bharata, Bhagavata, Ramayana epics and their impact on the Vagyakaras.
Right.
Especially from the vernacular point of view, if you see the trajectory, of course, the creator is Jayadeva of these ideas, some of these ideas, undoubtedly. Yeah. But each one, how they have, what they have culled from the epic is very interesting.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So relationships become something living and breathing that I perpetually have access to as a sadhaka, as a dancer, as a musician, or just primarily as a bhakta about anything. So, and what I choose to take from it, how I engage with it, how do I use this to deal with relationships in my own life, all of that becomes open to me. So that's the real focus of relationships, that I'm able to adapt it to me in today, not just in my view to Paramatma, but as an extension of that in my view to life around me, right? That's the part that I find fascinating about relationships as well.
Absolutely. And especially as you said in the epics. I mean, I would even include Bhagavata Puran, of course, in the epics, because it's always, Ramayana, Bharata, Bhagavatam, so I think all three.
And Bhagavatam. So it needs.
You cannot remove them. You cannot extricate, them. So, I think that's something beautiful.
Thank you. Just beautiful. Like put so many ideas, so many questions.
I don't know how much time did we speak? Did we really overspill or right?
Conversation for half an hour, but I lost track of all time, as is the case whenever I listen to you. So thank you for kind of like just coming together and just I don't know. This feels like a satsang to me, for also all the people who are joining it. Just going back with so much food for thought, just going back with so much to process and really delve into the beauty of relationships. So thank you for
no, absolutely. And it's always a pleasure to talk to you, because you always keep adding dimensions which others can't even think about. So it's really something. I really enjoy your mind. It's brilliant mind. So
coming from you, for those
not at all. And I thank Alap also for, asking me to do this. You couldn't have chosen a better conversationalist for me than Vinay, to speak to. So thank you, Alap.
So, but definitely, I think something we did think we'd probably take questions. And I'm just seeing some questions coming up about relationships with non-human beings. That's something that I will be talking about for those of you who would like to. The session is happening. The relationship session is happening this Saturday at 8 p.m.
Right.
38th. So those of you, where you can get your tickets for this. But that's something I also want to explore with you, ma'am, in a longer conversation about animals. Krishna, Rama, they're big animals.
Oh yes. That will be beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. So so much more to discuss with you. I'm very grudgingly going to
in fact, just that section where you talk about all the asuras in different animal forms that Krishna kills through the Bhagavatam.
Yes.
That itself is a huge thing, like Keshi being illusion and somebody else being the horse being the illusion. So there are so many elements that which tie up symbolically. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Interesting.
Absolutely. And just all of that in comparison reflected with all of the areas where he has very deep bonds with animals. So, that's something also I wanted in on Saturday, and I'm not going to give more disclaimers than that for those of you who want to join, where you can get your ticket. beyond that, just so grateful to you, ma'am, for this conversation.
Oh,
Thank you.
I'm thrilled,
Thank
and
you, Anupama.
I wish you all the best for the session. So
Thank you,
I'm
ma'am.
sure
Thank
it will be as usual. It will be brilliant. So yeah.
so kind of you. Thank you, Alap, for bringing someone who I absolutely adore. And I think this is the first formal live that we are having, not the first interaction that
Yes,
we are having.
of course.
But
Yes.
this is, I think, the start to many, many, many more such things. So thank you so much, ma'am.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you, Vinay. It's a pleasure to talk to you as always. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am.
Bye. 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 Bye, everyone.
Bye.